there's something to be said for putting your idea out there. But without getting too much in the weeds, you can actually put your idea out there, introduce it to people for a certain period of time, and then still get a patent. Tell somebody about it, show it to people. You got a year to go get a patent. I usually approach it more of like a business decision. Like, what are your odds that the patent is going to be worth more money than you're going to have to pay to get it?
Hey everyone, I'm Jonathan from Autodesk. Welcome to Shop Talk, the podcast series where we catch up with makers, designers, and engineers from shop to shop. Today, we're speaking with Mike Clifford from Modustrial Maker. He's got a channel that covers everything from construction to fabrication to digital design. In this episode, we talk about Mike's background as a patent attorney, how that led him to being a maker, YouTuber, and fabricator, and all the clever ways he solves problems in a really complex environment. Let's dive in. Okay. Hey, Mike, thanks for coming. Let's start with just kind of introducing you to everybody.
So I make all kinds of things, which is a very general statement, but I think that's because I just do a very broad arrangement of things. I started Modustrial Maker in about 2017, I believe. I was a full-time attorney at the time and just kind of caught the bug of making things for a home that I just bought. And when I do something, I tend to just get really, really into it. So I kind of went down a hole, started learning, teaching myself how to, make all kinds of things with woodworking, concrete, metalworking, 3D printing, digital fabrication, everything. And after a little bit of watching YouTube videos, started seeing YouTube videos that are started seeing, I guess, things I would have liked to seen in videos that the people I was watching weren't making. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try making some of my own videos. One thing led to another. And in 2020, I left my law firm. I quit that to make things and do YouTube full time. I bought an abandoned building here on the north side of Chicago. Put up a video about that, and it kind of it went viral. And so for the last almost 4 years, this building has kind of taken over my life. So it's been a lot of renovation work, building out, kitchens, bathrooms, things like that. But now that's just wrapped up. And so Industrial Maker now is kind of transitioning to back to the roots, which is really just cool high-end furniture design projects, and documenting all those on YouTube. So that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, that's cool. And you were able to just transition to doing YouTube full time and quit your day job, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds like now I've been able to make a living at this 4 years now. It sounds a little easier, but yeah, it was definitely petrified at the time, and very scary. But it's one of those things. Like, I think I always say, people are like, "Well, how'd you do it?" I was like, I had to. Like, just knowing that you had this opportunity to do something that you really, really wanted to do, and if you didn't do it, it was one of those things you'd always just look back on and regret. So, like, it wasn't a decision. It was just what happened in life, is what I like to say.
So you're having these nightmares about, so you want to work at our intellectual property law firm. Explain this gap in your resume. Oh, I decided to be a YouTuber, knocking down walls in an old building for a
Yeah.
few years.
Well, I think at that point I've been an attorney for since 2006, so 14 years. And I always kind of say, like, well, if you're going to do something, you shouldn't have a safety net. You shouldn't,
Yeah.
if you say, like, well, I'm going to dabble in this, but if it doesn't work, I'll go back. I think that mindset kind of just leads you to it. You're already planning your exit.
Right.
And so I kind of just said, I'm never going back. And I'm sticking to that now, 4 years later. I'm never going back. Occasionally people ask me, questions about patents, because obviously in what we do, people have lots of ideas and
Yeah.
inventions. And so, I'm happy to, as a layperson, with a little bit different background than most people, answer those questions. But I'm pretty set on a career of building things and designing things is the future for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big jump, man. I mean, we've talked to people on the podcast like Joseph Willis recently, and he's in radiology, right? And so you think, oh, from radiology to like using Fusion making stuff. There's actually kind of a lot of connective tissue there because in
Yeah.
radiology, you're looking at things in 3D and it's all, 3D imaging and all that.
Mhm.
Geometry, really complex geometry, like all that stuff would have to come into it, right? But um, patent law is another, that's like another step further from, what we
Right.
normally see with stories like yours. But probably still some, I mean, I know you were working in tech, I believe, software, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you have to have a technical mind for that, no matter what. I would think to be a lawyer working on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've my degree, electrical engineering, and but I've always kind of just been more of a had the eye for design and really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, so I mean, it's related. I think it's more the attorney job was more helpful for YouTube because I always say at its heart, YouTube is really a storytelling platform.
yeah,
And as an attorney, if you're a good attorney,
that's what you
the
do.
most persuasive thing in the world is a good story.
Yep.
So usually, like when I was working with inventors and things like that, um, you could argue the law until you're blue in the face about why this invention is so important and should be granted a patent. But the most persuasive thing is just explaining what that cool thing that this invention does that you couldn't do with anything else. And if you just to back up a little bit, the main thing I did is I helped companies like Google and Sprint and a few others get patents on their products. So I was working with inventors, would bring their ideas to me. We'd write the patents, and then we'd go back and forth with the U.S. Patent Office to convince them why this is a new and novel invention, and there should be a patent granted. So, my approach was usually to try and explain why it was so cool. And once you had the patent examiner on board that this was something that was really cool and you could do some cool things with it, which is a good story, you tell the story of what you can do, then it becomes a matter of, well, let's figure out how this works within the constructs of the law to get the patent rather than, kind of butting heads. So that storytelling approach to things, I think, has really lended itself well to YouTube. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find yourself like, okay, so my dad's a lawyer, right? And anytime I had an idea where I was prototyping with something or coming up with some whatever it was, an idea for a product or whatever, my dad would always hound me to get to apply for a patent for it,
mhm.
right? Like, because that's just immediately where his mind went. Go, do that, get a patent. Somebody else is going to steal this from you. And when I was doing that stuff, it was kind of the early days of open source and sharing stuff online when that stuff really started spreading a lot. Like,
Yeah,
Instructables, which is the platform we have, and
yeah,
all the stuff on YouTube and everything. And I remember kind of this like there was sort of a generational divide there where I'm like, Dad, you don't understand. Like, it's actually a lot more valuable for me to just put this out there and, raise awareness out of it. And if it did turn into a product, it just means there's more people that are seeing it. Like
yeah.
there's nothing about this that's like so spectacular. It's not like a new energy source or something. It's a widget, it's a toy or whatever, like, isn't it better to just put it out there and, get feedback from people? It's probably more valuable than owning the intellectual property.
Um, I think there's, like a lot of things, truth's probably in the middle.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of a backlash for quite a while. I mean, even when I started working with Google, they had like almost no patents because they had a policy for a long time that exactly like what you were saying, just coming from the founders that were, tech nerds. And then the tune switched when they started realizing some of their competitors had, tens of thousands of patents and they needed to do something about it. But sort of on a smaller scale, so which would relate to sort of like individual inventors. My personal philosophy, and I don't actually own any patents. So there you go. I kind of got so sick of writing them at work that it's like hard for me to do on my own in my spare time. Um, but I do think, there's something to be said for putting your idea out there. But without getting too much in the weeds, you can actually put your idea out there, introduce it to people for a certain period of time, and then still get a patent on it. Tell somebody about it, show it to people. You got a year to go get a patent. I usually approach it more from like a business decision. Like what are your odds that the patent is going to be worth more money than you're going to have to pay to get it? Because some things, you look at, you're like, are you going to be able to protect that patent? Will you be able to do something? Are you trying to sell your product to a bigger company, in which case they're going to want a patent? Um, you can choose what you do with your patent. Just because you own a patent doesn't mean you have to enforce it. You can give, some companies have started taking an approach of like, they'll get a patent and then they give away a free license. With intellectual property, I know like Autodesk for many years, I think perhaps they'll do have your educational license
Yeah.
where you're giving a copyright license essentially to students for free. And, it's sort of, uh, you know, patents, intellectual property, they're not inherently good or evil. It's sort of whether the person who owns them is doing good or doing evil with them. So that's sort of what I usually tell people is like, look, don't think you're bad because you get a patent. You know,
Yeah.
if it makes financial sense, get one. You never know when you might want it down the road. You can choose not to do anything with it. That's fine. You can make the moral decisions later.
Yeah. Do you have any like products or processes or any ideas for, stuff that you might sell that might warrant a patent?
Yeah, it is something I would love to do. But I haven't done it for myself personally yet.
Tell us about the building you bought. Like
Sure, yeah.
when you open
So
your YouTube
it is,
channel,
it's actually a commercial building.
yeah.
So I bought this two-story building, um, and it's downstairs. It's about 6,000 square feet, which is good amount of space, split in equally in two levels. And so downstairs is like the garage and workshop, and then upstairs is my home. And so I started by building out the home first up here. We've completed that, and right now I've got the shop kind of functional for what I need. But I've got a city grant in the works right now to build out a gallery and workshop space on the first floor, which I just was meeting with a contractor about right before this meeting, and just put out a video on my YouTube channel, sort of explaining the plans for that. Shameless plug. So that's sort of the next step in this building.
I mean, when you bought it, it was in really bad shape from what I could
Yeah,
tell.
yeah. We basically had to rip out everything but the bricks. Even though the roof was leaking, we had to replace the entire roof. First thing we did it. So I paid about I think 315,000 for it, which is not a lot of money in Chicago. Even this area is a little more affordable, but yeah, it was basically paying for the land plus a little bit.
Yeah. Um, what possessed you to do that?
Uh, I don't quite know. No, it just kind of seemed right. I was looking all over the country for some place that I could have a shop. My first shop, I was in a loft downtown, which randomly had in the basement an 18 by 24 storage unit that I converted into a workshop.
Yeah.
And luckily was underneath about 2 feet of concrete in the first floor, which was the parking garage. So I could work down there 24/7 and not bug any of the neighbors in my loft condo building.
Nice.
But they were starting to get a little sick of the dust. So I was not exactly welcome to continue working in the shop there. And it was also an expensive loft I bought when I was a partner at a law firm and kind of, putting everything on the line. That didn't make sense. So I needed a new home that wasn't as expensive and a new shop. So the idea was to find a space that could do both. I had a couple places fall through. I was actually looking out in California, a couple other places as well. And my realtor found this place. We walked in and it was like in terrible shape, but the layout was perfect and had three-phase 240 power in the garage.
Wow.
So it was like, whoa, this place is actually like perfect layout for building a home upstairs, like a three-bedroom home upstairs, and then an open shop space downstairs. And so it was just like, okay, well, this is it. This is all falling in place. So um, pulled the trigger and did it.
How did you prioritize things? Like how did you make those decisions about what to do first and then, cascade
Yeah,
from
well,
there?
and it was tricky because I wanted to film things for YouTube
Yeah.
as well. And the way that YouTube works is not necessarily conducive to the way contractors want to work. Um, I would have done room by room, so you could have like each video about like redoing a room.
Yeah.
But they want to, do all the walls at once, all the electrical at once, all the HVAC at once.
Right.
Um, so I have a friend of mine who's a general contractor, and I sort of worked it out with him that his guys were going to come in and do basically drywall, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, build that out. So that part we hired an architect. And the architect, I think what you were saying, kind of going back through those steps, which when you haven't done a lot of construction, and I'm still very much learning in that too, that is like you think, oh, this is a simple thing to do, but then there's that one little thing that you can't do, or even sometimes it's like permits. Like right now, I'm struggling downstairs with wanting to redo the electrical to get some extra 240 outlets. And it's like, well, actually, the city won't give you permits unless you redo the whole thing because you need separate meters for that commercial and residential space now. And so instead of like 3,000, it's 30,000. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But that's just the way those things work. But yeah, so I hired a general contractor to handle sort of the guts of the building. And then I did all the pretty stuff that I enjoy. So like did the hardwood, installed hardwood flooring, built out the bathrooms. I fabricated all the concrete sinks, did all the tile work, built all the kitchen cabinets, um, that sort of thing. So that was kind of the way, and that ended up taking quite a while. Unfortunately, it was a friend who did it because it was difficult to negotiate that, like doing part of it myself and having him kind of manage the project, except for me. um,
Yeah. You said something I think that's pretty important there for people to consider if they're getting into this world, which is do the stuff that you want to do, right?
yeah,
Like that's a pretty good way to kind of, approach it. Like you enjoy making the sign behind you in the background, for example, or like,
yeah,
you've got all these cool there's like a railing project you did where you've got this
yeah.
cool like geometry you did in Fusion and then there's slices through it and like, it makes this cool pattern that changes from points of view and so on. Like
Yeah, I've got, by the way, I have like photos of those pulled up. If I don't know if we want to screen share on the
sure, yeah,
podcast, um, to
go
show what
for
you're
it.
talking about as we go. But yeah, there's a lot of things, and actually a lot of those things to do the plug for Autodesk here.
Yeah.
I did use Fusion to design a lot of those more complex things for all the sinks, making molds for custom shaped sinks,
Uh-huh.
a parametric wave handrail. Here, let me see if I can just share this real quick. One
Yeah.
here of you can kind of see the wave, and this is sort of how the assembly went
Uh-huh.
together.
Simple
Um,
assembly, right? Like an
Very
assembly
simple.
that's regular and like, very rational and something that you can fabricate really quickly. But then you've got this really cool, form flowing through there.
Yeah. It's
Not,
basically the exact same thing as the shop sign
yeah,
that I did here. Um, this one that you can see,
yeah.
it was in the background behind me right now. But yeah, it's just using a sculpt environment to create a sort of
Uh-huh.
wavy shape and then cutting it out. The sign was cool. What was really cool in Fusion, and one thing I love about it is the ability to sort of work with, this one has 3D printed letters with the parametric wave wood sign,
Oh,
and the
those are
ability
big
to kind
3D
of
print.
work.
Three, excuse me. Those are big 3D prints.
Yeah.
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 Right. So your CNC router, you've got a pretty big machine. What are you running?
So yeah, I've got two machines. I've got a 5x10 Avid,
Nice.
and then I've got a 4x2 X Carve Pro.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one's for big sheets and one's for more detailed work. Is that the idea?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I've worked with both companies. Honestly, I love Inventables. They're an awesome company. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like an iPhone of CNCs,
Yeah.
with the software they've created. Um, Now that I've sort of developed a proficiency with working with Fusion and that whole workflow to my Avid, I usually just use that most, honestly. But yeah, I usually use the Avid most, but the Inventables is also a great first CNC machine for someone who, doesn't want to get in the weeds.
Do you find yourself like being your design being informed by the machines you have? Like you do a project in that, and then as you're watching the machine go, you say, "Oh, this machine can do this, so maybe I'm going to try this with another project."
That's a good question. I'm gonna say I don't. Hmm. Not necessarily. I don't think. I use because I what I usually do is actually sort of the opposite: is come up with the design and then figure out what machines are going to be needed to make it work.
Yeah.
And then maybe the machine would influence it as in if the capabilities of the machine, with a CNC, for example, I've got like a 6 inch height there. So that's going to create some limitations about, how deep of a design I can go with, or whether I need to sort of change the process to get, do multiple pieces that are going to be stacked together. Like you can see here, uh, this is an Arctic, what I call the Arctic erosion table. It's a solid white concrete with a resin fill and sort of a topographical uh, lake inlay.
Yeah.
So this one, yeah, I just sort of designed this using spline tool and Fusion. Um, Played with it for quite a bit of time to come up with the shape I liked, and then ended up having to cut out sort of individual half-inch pieces of foam to
Oh,
make the
yeah.
knockout. Rather than, what I would have been ideal is like an 8.5 inch piece.
Right.
But I just decided at the end of the day, just big sheets of half-inch foam, cut them out of that, stacked them, glued them, and used that as the form.
Yeah. It looks great. You
Thanks.
know, I decided a while back I was kind of tired of resin projects, but then I saw the one you did with that's next to that with the
So the,
sliced yeah,
this
that
one.
one.
Yeah, I call this the bean table or the peanut table, the potato table, something like that. Um, yeah, I like, and it's funny you mentioned that because I also have love-hate with resin. But it's beautiful when it's
Yeah.
clear, black. I just hate when you put a bunch of sparkly crap in it and it
Yeah.
looks like I just feel like it's one of those things that in the future you're gonna look back and go, why did I dump green and blue sparkles into a beautiful piece of walnut or maple? It's like putting ice cream on pizza is a sort of analogy I make. Yeah, pizza's great, ice cream's great, but like, why are we putting these together again? What's the
Yeah.
point?
Yeah. And I'm interested in the concrete sink too.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
because you did
yeah.
CNC form
So
work for that, right?
yeah, and I've actually got, so let's see. So this was I pulled up one. I've done a few of them. So this is the picture I found is actually the thumbnail. I can probably get you some better pictures, but this was basically a custom um, mold I made, and I found some pretty cool videos here. So let's see. Okay, so I found a video here kind of showing. This is just from the manufacturing environment, I believe, and I just sort of recorded the process of what it could go going through. And I use this in my YouTube video, but basically carving out of a big block of foam um, a form. And so you can kind of
Hmm.
see how those layers take shape. And then the finishing pass here. Um,
Yep.
so this was how I made the form for one of those sinks. And a sink, it seems pretty simple when you look at it, but then when you realize that like all the edges have to have like a subtle slope,
Yep.
even like, the back edge, these edges, it gets to be hard. It's harder to build out of wood because there's these
Hmm.
very subtle angles. And here I wanted to add that crescent shape to it, which was right here because it was a big sink and I wanted some extra counter space.
Hmm.
So functionally and aesthetically, I thought this cool sort of crescent slope was easy, very easy to model in Fusion and then cut out on the CNC. And then you create form that you pour concrete over and get a very cool sort of custom sink.
Did you have to do any finishing to the mold? Like
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm still actually, I have a way that works. I don't know that it's the best way because it takes some time. But basically what I usually use drywall mud,
Oh yeah,
as a
that makes
first
sense.
layer.
Yep. And then a
Um,
mold release on top of that.
yeah, because I'm stacking 2 inch pieces of the pink foam insulation,
Uh-huh.
Foamular 250, which works pretty well. But
But
sometimes
you're
when
gonna
you get
have
yeah,
lines.
there's lines where
Yeah.
it's occasionally you tear out where they come together and you kind of need to patch and sand that in. So I'll use drywall mud. to kind of cover everything. It's cheap and easy to sort of spread and easy to sand. And then sand it down, and then I'll do a layer of resin on top of that because kind of that's a super smooth surface. It won't stick to it. I think there actually are products now that will go straight over the foam. So there's part of me that thinks that buying the expensive foam, pay like $400 for
Yeah.
a piece of foam and just coating it with a specialty product that's made to seal foam for concrete molds might be worth the money in the future.
Yeah.
Especially because foamular has gone up. It used to be $30 a sheet when I started doing this, and now I think it's closer to 60.
Yeah.
I actually don't even think you can buy it in California in big
Oh,
sheets.
is that a what is it, prop 3 or whatever? Like
I think so. Yeah.
yeah.
Like the pink foam comes in 4x8 sheets. And I
Uh-huh.
remember going to a Home Depot in California and seeing that they only had 2x2 sheets of the pink foam.
Huh.
And none of the Home Depots in California seem to carry the big 4x8 sheets of pink foam.
That's odd. Yeah, I
Um,
mean, and if you go pro, usually what these guys do is they'll make a positive and then pour silicone and then fiberglass
yeah.
resin over that, and then like you've got something reusable at that point, right?
Yeah. And I'm actually editing a video now. I don't have pictures of it. But I just did with a fan who was building an Airbnb. We did a recreation of Kim Kardashian's viral sink. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but if you Google it, it'll come right up. It basically is a sink that looks it's such a gradual, small, slight slope that it looks like there's no sink there at
It looks
all.
flat. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
so we did that, and to do that, we actually used a stretch fabric over clay,
Oh,
and that worked
yep.
really well. Um,
Interesting.
which you could do that with concrete, but would actually be reusable as well. Um, so we built up clay in the shape of the sink, just kind of sculpted the clay, and then laid the stretching fabric over it. And apparently, this fabric, I've not used it, but it's a stretch fabric that's waterproof, has like a membrane on it, and
Oh,
so concrete won't stick, and you don't have to do the fiberglass process
nice.
because you basically just put like a block of something under it, and then the fabric will naturally stretch it tight, and then when the concrete comes, you'll get that sort of nice natural slope from the fabric stretching a little bit. And it's a pretty cool product. I just tried.
Yeah,
It's
so you're just using gravity to get the shape then.
But the other thing you could do, and we were doing it really quickly, so we used clay to sculpt it. But you could do that really gradual slope on a CNC. Actually cut it out of wood.
Hmm.
Um, cut your form out of wood and then stretch the fabric over it, and that would probably it should work pretty well as long as as long as you're careful to add draft angles for sort of all vertical surfaces you're going to have to remove concrete from. Um, it would be fine. So yeah, it's
Always add draft angles, folks.
yes.
Always. Never do any mold with a straight side. You're gonna regret it. So you got a couple other projects on there. Let's talk about those.
Sure, yeah. You just kind of do it. I was going through and I was like, wow, I've done so many different things. Let's see. So this one, let's see, I'll pull up the Star Wars table here. Got a couple
Oh, yes,
pictures
of
of that.
course. Star Wars table. Yep.
This was one where it was the first time I think I really understood the power of parametric design.
Hmm.
Um, Getting the proportion. So this is just the lighting in Star Wars that you look on like the Death Star or anything. It has these sort of like di dashes and dots, and
Uh-huh.
usually in groups of three. Um, and so I wanted to kind of make a table that was Star Wars inspired, but if you weren't a Star Wars fan, would just be a cool table.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I had the idea of doing a concrete base right here and then doing some white epoxy that I could put LEDs to illuminate underneath um, to make, the Star Wars light pattern. Um, Getting the spacing between these lines and the spacing between the dots, the width of the dots, all those things, getting that proportion so it looked right on the table was tricky. So I put, the width of the width of the ovals or the dots was one parameter. The space between them, the space between the three rows and the edge of the table, those were all parameters. And um, if you saw some of the original designs, it would be where the proportions didn't look right. And I'd previously been using SketchUp, and like in SketchUp, if you want to do, you're just going to kind of like start over and do the whole model again every time. And the fact that I could just change the parameter, change, for the distance between the rows, change the parameter for the distance of the table, it made it so quick to iterate through the spacing of that and get to a design that looked right, proportional. That was when I was like, okay, I am sold on Fusion as the way to design, these types of pieces.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, Came out really nice. I mean, you got nice sharp edges glowing through there. It looks like the epoxy maybe did a little bit of the work of like what's the word? Diffusing the light, right? So
Yeah.
like, did you have LED panels back there, or were you doing like individual
So
points?
so this was also done in Fusion. I wish I had pictures of it. There's actually little clips that are like a pressure. They're kind of squeezed, and the resin is let me back up here. Let's start over. Okay, so um for the lights that you can't see, I'll see if I can find a picture for you guys maybe. But essentially the way this was done was it was a concrete form, and the dots were all foam pieces that were cut out on the
Sure.
CNC. So
Uh-huh.
after I designed, figured that all out, it was very easy to cut those all the dots out of foam, put them in a concrete form. So there were holes through the concrete all the way through
Right.
the table. So we got a shell of this. Then in the same form, I could pour a thin layer of white epoxy to fill the gaps after the concrete had cured. And then I did a little bit more just clear epoxy behind it to give it more structure.
Oh, I
And
see.
yeah, so it's like a layer of diffusing white, but then underneath of it, a lot of it's clear, so you get more light. And
Nice.
then the table is about an inch thick. I only poured about a half inch of epoxy.
Uh-huh.
So there's a half inch in there, and I designed little clips that would hold LED strips. Basically,
Yep.
just like had little ridges on each side of kind of a U, and then a little U that held an LED strip, and it just kind of pressure fit into that space, the wall that was of concrete below the epoxy. I hope I explained that. Did that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And and it's a tricky thing, man. Getting it to go around that corner like that,
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that video because imagining like getting a concrete pour to work that way is got to be tricky.
Yeah, that's well, so what I do for a lot of these when you see the vertical walls is you actually use a spray gun and you
Uh-huh.
spray a very thin layer on the whole form,
Ah, okay.
without any like large aggregate in it. It's
I
just
see.
sand
Yep.
and concrete. That gives you the smooth surface, and then you hand pack the back with glass fibers,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
in a
Yep.
really dense, chunky mix that doesn't slump,
Uh-huh.
basically. Um,
Yeah, and then it's not that heavy because you only got an inch thick
yeah,
layer. Yeah.
like this Arctic corrosion table, which looks like a mass block uh of concrete. If that was a mass block, that'd be 600 something pounds, probably at
Yeah,
least.
yeah.
It's about 200 pounds, maybe 5/8 to 3/8, 5/8 inch to 3/4 inch thick on the inside, and it's hollow. It just has
Nice.
a couple of steel bars across embedded in the concrete that allow it to sit on a base.
And how about that what's that colorful one back there?
Oh, so this is another. So this was a fun project I did in Fusion to build a Lego epoxy guitar.
Ah, okay. Cool.
Um, so yeah, I just found like I think I started with a model or a photo of a Les Paul, but I kind
Uh-huh.
of wanted to tweak it a little bit for my own design. And then of course could basically created templates for the guitar. So
Uh-huh.
I just cut MDF templates for everything, for the pickups, all that sort of stuff, for a custom shaped guitar on the CNC. And Fusion was really cool to kind of take the model that existed and tweak the shape with the spline tool and um, come up with those. And then that's the front.
Did you
And
land
there's
a
obviously there's videos on all these if anyone's interested in the details of the projects. There's full videos, but this one was really came out cool. And there's the back. I almost like the back better. Um, let's see. At the back here, because you can see
Oh, nice. Yeah,
the
yeah.
Legos through the resin.
That is cool. Did that land you a Lego sponsorship?
Um, no, it didn't. But I actually randomly got a Star Wars Lego. The Star Wars table did, I
Oh,
think.
cool.
Because I got a couple of Lego Star Wars sponsorships on Instagram back in the day, which
Nice.
was one of those moments you pinch yourself. You're like, I am getting paid to build Lego R2D2. This is my job right now. How
Yeah.
is this happening? Uh,
Eight-year-old me is losing his mind
yeah,
right now. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You've made it, man. That's great. So yeah, let's get to the zombie apocalypse. So what's the first tool?
Okay, so I think the first tool uh, is probably the CNC. It's just so powerful in the amount of things it can do. Um, to the point where for a lot of things you just need glue and a piece of sandpaper to assemble it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which you can find in the rubble, I'm sure.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, or make your own somehow with sand on a beach. I don't know.
Yeah,
Rub,
there you
rub it
go.
on the beach for a while or something if something doesn't fit. Um, but yeah, so I guess and the interesting thing here is like, well, sometimes you're like, well, you need a drill to assemble things, but you can't build anything with a drill, really.
Right.
Only
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
I
You
think
can
the machine that gets you closest to being done with a diverse set of projects is the CNC, and the fact that you can like mill aluminum. You can work with wood. You can work foam. There's so many different materials that you can work with. Whether it's building forms, like say you want to do work with clay, like you can find clay outside and kind of use it in a similar way you could do concrete, but you could build forms and all kinds of things with the CNC. And so I think that would probably be the first thing. Not a cheap one, but it's definitely the most used tool day in, day out for me now that I have it.
nice. Cool. I like that one. You're the first person to go straight to CNC machine.
Why not? Just
So
go
yeah,
for
I know. I mean, if you can get anything, there you go. Love it. Well, Mike, thanks a lot, man. It's really interesting work, and we've really just scratched the surface. I know you've got a lot to say about 3D printing and your design process and like what's behind all this stuff. We should have you back to talk about all that because we probably could go all day with this. But thanks so much. I mean, I think the audience is really going to love this. And why don't you tell us where we can find you?
Sure. It's Modustrial Maker. It's like modern industrial smashed together, Modustrial, or like the sign behind my head, on YouTube and Instagram. I think YouTube, if you want to get down in the weeds, see everything that's done, that's the best place. But also do post a lot on Instagram too.
Awesome. Thanks, man. We'll see you soon.
Right. Thanks. Take care.
Hey, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Shop Talk. If you're ready to try Fusion for yourself, find the link in our description.